Hello, everyone. Sorry I delayed a few minutes getting on here. TikTok was, for some reason, keeping me off for whatever reason. Can everyone hear me? Thumbs up, stars, likes. Let me know if you have any issues hearing me at all. All right. Excellent. Has everybody had a good week so far? I sound great, thanks. Come on, book. Work with me here. There we go. Good evening from North Carolina. Well, good evening from Virginia. All right. Since I got on here a few minutes late, we'll give it until about 10 after for a few more people to join, and then I'll get started. So far, you guys that are on with me right now, do we have anybody new this evening? Or has everyone pretty much been from the first evening read? Well, welcome, Dolores. Cindis, welcome. Darlene, welcome. Good evening from Texas. Hi, Texas. New from Alabama. Hello. How exciting. Getting so many new people this evening. I love it. So just as a quick recap for any of you folks that are new, so this is the book that we've been reading for the past few weekends, All the Light We Cannot See. And basically this book is set in the time of Liverpool, hello, from World War II, and we are primarily following the storylines of a young girl who lives in Paris with her father, and a young boy and his sister who live in Germany. And so we're kind of watching their two backgrounds, and at some point their worlds are going to collide. So that's kind of where we're going on a journey and watching them kind of develop as characters. The little girl, Marie-Laure, she is blind, and so her father is helping her learn how to navigate the world as a blind person. And the little German boy, his name is Werner, and he and his sister live in an orphanage in Germany. And he's very good at creating things and fixing things. He's a tinkerer of sorts. And so we've gotten to a point in the story where his talents have been discovered, and he will probably be enlisted in the German military probably very soon. And at the moment, Marie-Laure and her father are actually trying to flee Paris because the Germans have, at this point, have invaded Paris. So we're about to dive in and watch these guys try their best to see if they can escape whatever's about to happen in the future. So, all right. 8:09, got about another minute left, and then I'll get started. And when you, just real quick, when you say from Liverpool, you mean like across the pond Liverpool? Am I assuming that correctly? Because I don't know if there's a Liverpool somewhere here in the States, so. From the UK. Well, welcome. I'm glad to have you on this side of the pond. Oh, okay, cool. All right. And hopefully at some point my cats will not bombard me while I'm reading to you guys. I'm in a bit of a different setup this evening. All right. And I'm actually going to take a cover off so I can hold my book easier. Okay. And if anyone happens to have the book with them, I don't know, maybe we'll be reading along together. If anyone happens to have this book on hand, at the moment, we are on page 87 and the chapter is called Exodus. And as a disclaimer with the last few weeks, there are probably going to be French words and names, German words and names, maybe even some Russian words and names that I will most likely butcher, so I'm apologizing for that ahead of time. But here we go. All right. Parisians continue to press through the gates. By 1 a.m., the gendarmes have lost control, and no trains have arrived or departed in over 4 hours. Marie Laure sleeps on her father's shoulder. The locksmith hears no whistles, no rattling couplings, no trains. At dawn, he decides it will be better to go on foot. They walk all morning. Paris thins steadily into low houses and stand-alone shops broken by long strands of trees. Noon finds them picking their way through deadlocked traffic on a new motorway near Croissant, a full 10 miles west of their apartment, as far from home as Marie Laure has ever been. At the crest of a low hill, her father looks over his shoulder. Vehicles are backed up as far as he can see, carryalls and vans, a sleek new cloth-top wraparound V12 wedged between two mule carts, some cars with wooden axles and some run out of gasoline, some with households of furniture strapped to the roof, a few with entire bristling farmyards crammed into trailers, chickens and pigs in cages, cows clomping alongside, dogs panting against windshields. The entire procession slogs past at little more than walking speed. Both lanes are clogged. Everyone staggers west, away. A woman bicycles wearing dozens of costume necklaces. A man tows a leather armchair on a handcart. A black kitten cleaning itself on the center cushion. Women push baby carriages crammed with china, bird cages, crystalware. A man in a tuxedo walks along calling, "For the love of God, let me through," though no one steps aside. And he moves no more quickly than anyone else. Marie Laure stays at her father's hip, with her cane in her fist. With each step, another disembodied question spins around her. How far to Saint-Germain? Is there food, Auntie? Who has fuel? She hears husbands yelling at wives. She hears that a child has been run over by a truck on the road ahead. In the afternoon, a trio of airplanes race past, loud and fast and low, and people crouch where they walk, and some scream and others clamber into the ditch and put their faces in the weeds. By dusk, they are west of Versailles. Marie Laure's heels are bleeding, and her stockings are torn, and every 100 steps she stumbles. When she declares that she can walk no farther, her father carries her off the road, traveling uphill through mustard flowers until they reach a field a few 100 yards from a small farmhouse. The field has been mowed only halfway, the cut hay left unraked and unbaled, as though the farmer has fled in the middle of his work. From his rucksack, the locksmith produces a loaf of bread and some links of white sausage, and they eat these quietly, and then he lifts her feet into his lap. In the gloaming to the east, he can make out a gray line of traffic herded between the edges of the road. The thin and stupefied bleating of automobile horns. Someone calls as if to a missing child, and the wind carries the sound away. Is something on fire, Papa? Nothing is on fire. I smell smoke. He pulls off her stockings to inspect her heels. In his hands, her feet are as light as birds. What is that noise? Grasshoppers. Is it dark? Getting there now. Where will we sleep? Here. Are there beds? No, ma chérie. Where are we going, Papa? The director has given me the address of someone who will help us. Where? A town called Évreux. We are going to see a man named Monsieur Guianot. He is a friend of the museum's. How far is Évreux? It will take us 2 years of walking to get there. She seizes his forearm. I am teasing, Marie. Évreux is not so far. If we find transportation, we will be there tomorrow. You will see. She manages to stay quiet for a dozen heartbeats, and then she says, But for now? For now we will sleep. With no beds? With the grass as our beds. You might like it. In Évreux, we will have beds, Papa? I expect so. What if he does not want us to stay there? He will want us. But if he does not? Then we will go visit my uncle, your great-uncle, in Saint-Malo. Uncle Etienne? You said he was crazy. He is partially crazy, yes. He is maybe 76% crazy. She does not laugh. How far is Saint-Malo? Enough questions, Marie. Monsieur Guianot will want us to stay in Évreux, in big, soft beds. How much food do we have, Papa? Some. Are you still hungry? I'm not hungry. I want to save the food. Okay, let's save the food. Let's be quiet now and rest. She lies back. He lights another cigarette. 6 to go. Bats dive and swoop through clouds of gnats, and the insects scatter and reform once more. We are mice, he thinks, and the sky swirls with hawks. You are very brave, Marie-Laure. The girl has already fallen asleep. The night darkens. When his cigarette is gone, he eases Marie-Laure's feet to the ground and covers her with her coat and opens the rucksack. By touch, he finds his case filled with woodworking tools. Tiny saws, tacks, gouges, carving chisels, fine gritted sandpapers. Many of these tools were his grandfather's. From beneath the lining of the case, he withdraws a small bag made of heavy linen and cinched with a drawstring. All day he has restrained himself from checking on it. Now he opens the bag and upends its contents onto his palm. In his hand, the stone is about the size of a chestnut. Even at this late hour, in the quarter light, it glows a majestic blue, strangely cold. The director said there would be 3 decoys. Added to the real diamond, that makes 4. One would stay behind at the museum. 3 others would be sent in 3 different directions. One south with a young geologist, another north with the chief of security, and one is here, in a field west of Versailles, inside the tool case of Daniel Leblanc, principal locksmith for the Museum of National History. 3 fakes, 1 real. It is best, the director said, that no man knows whether he carries the real diamond or a reproduction. And everyone, he said, giving them each a grave look, should behave as if he carries the real thing. The locksmith tells himself that the diamond he carries is not real. There is no way the director would knowingly give a tradesman a 133-carat diamond and let him walk out of Paris with it. And yet as he stares at it, he cannot keep his thoughts from the question, could it be? He scans the field. Trees, sky, hay, darkness falling like velvet. Already a few pale stars. Marie-Laure breathes the measured breath of sleep. Everyone should behave as if he carries the real thing. The locksmith reties the stone inside the bag and slips it back into his rucksack. He can feel its tiny weight there, as though he has slipped it inside his own mind, like a knot. Hours later, he wakes to see the silhouette of an airplane blot stars as it hurtles east. It makes a soft tearing sound as it passes overhead. Then it disappears. The ground concusses a moment later. A corner of the night sky beyond a wall of trees blooms red. In the lurid, flickering light, he sees that the airplane was not alone, that the sky teems with them, a dozen swooping back and forth, racing in all directions. And in a moment of disorientation, he feels that he's not looking up, but down, as though a spotlight has been shined into a wedge of bloodshot water, and the sky has become the sea, and the airplanes are hungry fish. harrying their prey in the dark. August 8th, 1944. Saint-Malo. Doors soar away from their frames. Bricks transmute into powder. Great distending clouds of chalk and earth and granite spout into the sky. All 12 bombers have already turned and climbed and realigned high above the channel before roof slates blown into the air finish falling onto the streets. Flames scamper up walls. Parked automobiles catch fire, as do curtains and lampshades and sofas and mattresses and most of the 20,000 volumes in the public library. The fires pool and strut. They flow up the sides of the ramparts like tides. They splash into alleys, over rooftops, through a car park. Smoke chases dust. Ash chases smoke. A newsstand floats, burning. From cellars and crypts throughout the city, Malians send up oaths. Lord God, safeguard this town, its people. Don't overlook us in your name, please. Amen. Old men clutch hurricane lamps. Children shriek. Dogs yowl. In an instant, 400-year-old beams in row houses are ablaze. One section of the old city, tucked against the western walls, becomes a firestorm in which the spires of flames, at their highest, reached 300 feet. The appetite for oxygen is such that objects heavier than house cats are dragged into the flames. Shop signs swing toward the heat from their brackets. A potted hedge comes sliding across the rubble and capsizes. Swifts, flushed from chimneys, catch fire and swoop like blown sparks out over the ramparts and extinguish themselves in the sea. On the Rue de la Crosse, the Hotel of Bees becomes almost weightless for a moment, lifted in a spiral of flame before it begins to rain in pieces back to the earth. Number 4, Rue Vaudreuil. Marie-Laure curls into a ball beneath her bed with the stone in her left fist and the little house in her right. Nails in the timber shriek and sigh. Bits of plaster and brick and glass cascade onto the floor, onto the model city on the table, and onto the mattress above her head. Papa, 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 Marie-Laure is saying, but her body seems to have detached itself from her voice, and her words make a far-away, desolate cadence. The notion occurs to her that the ground beneath Saint-Malo has been knitted together all along by the root structure of an immense tree, located at the center of the city, in a square no one ever walked her to, and the massive tree has been uprooted by the hand of God, and the granite is coming with it, heaps and clumps and clods of stones pulling away as the trunk comes up, followed by the fat tendrils of roots, the root structure like another tree turned upside down and shoved into the soil. Isn't that how Dr. Giffard might have described it? The ramparts crumbling, streets leaking away, block-long mansions falling like toys. Slowly, gratefully, the world settles. From outside comes a light tingling, fragments of glass perhaps falling onto the streets. It sounds both beautiful and strange, as though gemstones were raining from the sky. Wherever her great-uncle is, could he have survived this? Could anyone? Has she? The house creaks, drips, and groans. Then comes a sound like wind in tall grass, only hungrier. It pulls at the curtains, at the delicate parts inside her ears. She smells smoke and knows. Fire. The glass has shattered out of her bedroom window, and what she hears is the sound of something burning beyond the shutters, something huge. The neighborhood, the entire town. The wall, floor, and underside of her bed remain cool. The house is not yet in flames, but for how long? Calm yourself, she thinks. Concentrate on filling your lungs, draining them, filling them again. She stays under the bed. The Hotel of Bees. What does he remember? He saw the engineer Bernd close the cellar door and sit on the stairs. He saw gigantic Frank Volkheimer in the golden armchair, picking at something on his trousers. Then the ceiling bulb blinked out, and Volkheimer switched on his field light, and a roar leapt down upon them, a sound so loud it was like a weapon itself, consuming everything, quaking the very crust of the earth, and for an instant all Werner could see was Volkheimer's light go skittering away like a frightened beetle. They were thrown. For an instant, or an hour, or a day, who could guess how long? Werner was back in Zollverein, standing above a grave a miner had dug for 2 mules at the edge of a field, and it was winter, and Werner was no older than 5, and the skin of the mules had grown nearly translucent, so that their bones were hazily visible inside, and little clods of dirt were stuck to their open eyes, and he was hungry enough to wonder if anything was left on them worth eating. He heard the blade of a shovel strike pebbles. He heard his sister inhale. Then, as though some retaining cord had reached its limit, something yanked him back into the cellar beneath the Hotel of Bees. The floor had stopped shaking, but the sound had not diminished. He clamps his palm right to his ear. The roar remains, the buzzing of 1,000 bees, very close. Is there noise? He asks, but he cannot hear himself ask it. The left side of his face is wet. The headphones he was wearing are gone. Where's the workbench? Where's the radio? What are these weights on top of him? From his shoulders, chest, and hair he plucks hot pieces of stone and wood. Find the field light, check on the others, check on the radio, check on the exit. Figure out what has gone wrong with his hearing. There are rational steps. He tries to sit up, but the ceiling has become lower, and he strikes his head. Heat. Getting hotter, he thinks. We are locked inside a box, and the box has been pitched into the mouth of a volcano. Seconds pass. Maybe they're minutes. Werner stays on his knees. Light. Then the others. Then the exit. Then his hearing. Probably the Luftwaffe men upstairs are already scrabbling through wreckage to help, but he cannot find his field light. He cannot even stand up. In the absolute blackness, his vision is webbed with 1,000 traveling wisps of red and blue. Flames? Phantoms? They lick along the floor and then rise to the ceiling, glowing strangely and serenely. Are we dead? He shouts into the dark. Have we died? Down 6 flights. Take a drink. The roar of the bombers has hardly faded when the artillery shell whistles over the house and makes a dull crash as it explodes not far away. Objects patter onto the roof. Shell fragments? Cinders? And Marie-Laure says aloud, "You are too high in the house," and she forces herself out from beneath the bed. Already she has lingered too long. She returns the stone inside the model house and restores the wood panels that make up its roof and twists the chimney back into place and puts the house into the pocket of her dress. Where are her shoes? She crawls around the floor, but her fingers feel only bits of wood and what might be shards of window glass. She finds her cane and goes in her stocking feet out the door and down the hall. The smell of smoke is stronger out here. The floor is still cool, walls still cool. She relieves herself in the 6th floor toilet and checks her instincts to flush, knowing the toilet will not refill, and double-checks the air to make sure it does not feel warm before continuing. 6 paces to the stairwell. A second shell screeches overhead, and Marie-Laure shrieks, and the chandelier above her head chimes as the shell detonates somewhere across the estuary. Rain of bricks, rain of pebbles, slower rain of soot. 8 curving stairs to the bottom. The 2nd and 5th steps creak. Pivot around the newel. 8 more stairs. 4th floor. 3rd. Here she checks the trip wire where her great-uncle built the telephone table on the landing. The bell is suspended and the wire remains taut, running vertically through the hole he has drilled in the wall. No one has come or gone. 8 paces down the hall into the 3rd bathroom. The bathtub is full. Things float in it. Flakes of ceiling plaster, maybe? And there's grit on the floor beneath her knees, but she puts her lips to the surface of the water and drinks her fill, as much as she can. Back to the stairwell and down to the 2nd floor, then the 1st. Grapevines carved into the banister. The coat rack has toppled over. Fragments of something sharp are in the hall. Crockery, she decides, from the hutch in the dining room, and she steps as lightly as she can. Down here, some of the windows must have blown out as well. She smells more smoke. Her great-uncle's wool coat hangs from the hook in the foyer, and she puts it on. No sign of her shoes here either. What has she done with them? The kitchen is a welter of fallen leaves and pots. A cookbook lies face down in her path like a shotgunned bird. In the cupboard she finds a half loaf of bread, what's left from the day before. Here, in the center of the floor, the cellar door with its metal ring. She slides aside the small dining table and heaves open the latch. Home of mice and damp and the stink of stranded shellfish, as if a huge tide swept in decades ago and took its time draining away. Marie-Laure hesitates over the open door, smelling the fires from outside and the clammy, almost opposite smell washing up from the bottom. Smoke, her great-uncle says, it is a suspension of particles, billions of drifting carbon molecules, bits of living room, cafes, trees, people. A third artillery shell screams toward the city from the east. Again Marie-Laure feels for the model house in her pocket of her dress. Then she takes the bread and her cane and starts down the ladder and pulls the trapdoor shut. Trapped. A light emerges. A light not kindled, Werner prays, by his own imagination, an amber beam wandering in the dust. It shuttles across debris, illuminates a fallen hunk of wall, lights up a twisted piece of shelving. It roves over a pair of metal cabinets that have been warped and mauled as if a giant hand has reached down and torn each in half. It shines on spilled toolboxes and broken pegboards and a dozen unbroken jars full of screws and nails. Volkheimer. He has his field light and is swinging its beam repeatedly over a welter of compacted wreckage in the far corner. Stones and cement and splintered wood. It takes Werner a moment to realize that this is the stairwell. What is left of the stairwell. That whole corner of the cellar is gone. The light hovers there another moment, as if allowing Werner to absorb their situation, then veers to the right and wobbles towards something nearby, and in the reflected light, through skeins of dust, Werner can see huge silhouettes of Volkheimer, ducking and stumbling as he moves between hanging rebar and pipes. Finally the light settles. With the flashlight in his mouth, in those granular, high-slung shadows, Volkheimer lifts pieces of brick and mortar and plaster, chunk after chunk, shredded boards and slabs of stucco. There is something beneath all of this, Werner sees, buried under these heavy things, a form coming into shape. The engineer, Bernd. Bernd's face is white with dust, but his eyes are two voids, and his mouth is a maroon hole. Though Bernd is screaming, through the serrated roar lodged in his ears, Werner cannot hear him. Volkheimer lifts the engineer, the older man like a child in the staff sergeant's arms, the field light gripped in Volkheimer's teeth, and crosses the ruined space with him, ducking again to avoid the hanging ceiling, and sets him in the golden armchair, still upright in the corner, now powdered white. Volkheimer puts his big hand on Bernd's jaw and gently closes the man's mouth. Werner, only a few feet away, hears no change in the air. The structure around them gives off another tremor, and hot dust cascades everywhere. Soon Volkheimer's light is making a circuit of what is left of the room. The 3 huge wooden beams have cracked, but none have given way entirely. Between them the stucco is spider-webbed, and pipes poke through in 2 places. The light veers behind him and illuminates the capsized workbench, the crushed case of their radio. Finally it finds Werner. He raises a palm to block it. Volkheimer approaches. His big, solicitous face presses close. Broad, familiar, deep-sunk eyes beneath the helmet. High cheekbones and long nose, flared at the tip like the knobs at the bottom of a femur. Chin like a continent. With slow care, Volkheimer touches Werner's cheek. His fingertip comes away red. Werner says, "We have to get out. We have to find another way out." "Out?" say Volkheimer's lips, and he shakes his head. There is no other way out. June 1940. Chateau. 2 days after fleeing Paris, Marie-Laure and her father enter the town of Évreux. Restaurants are either boarded up or thronged. 2 women in evening gowns hunch hip to hip on the cathedral steps. A man lies face down between market stalls, unconscious or worse. No mail service, telegraph lines down. The most recent newspaper is 36 hours old. At the prefecture, A queue for gasoline coupons snakes out the door and around the block. The first 2 hotels are full. The third will not unlock the door. Every so often, the locksmith catches himself glancing over his shoulder. "Papa," Marie-Laure is mumbling, bewildered. "My feet." He lights a cigarette. 3 left. "Not much farther now, Marie." On the western edge of Evreux, the road empties and the countryside levels out. He checks and rechecks the address the director has given him. Monsieur Francois Janot, 9 Rue Saint-Nicolas. But Monsieur Ganot's house, when they reach it, is on fire. In the windless dusk, sullen heaps of smoke pump upward through the trees. A car has crashed into a corner of the gatehouse and torn the gate off its hinges. The house, or what remains of it, is grand. 20 French windows in the facade, big freshly painted shutters, manicured hedges out front. Un chateau. "I smell smoke, Papa." He leads Marie-Laure up the gravel. His rucksack, or perhaps it is the stone deep inside, seems to grow heavier with each step. No puddles gleam in the gravel. No fire brigade swarms out front. Twin urns are toppled on the front steps. A burst chandelier sprawls across the entry stairs. "What is burning, Papa?" A boy comes towards them out of the smoky twilight, no older than Marie-Laure, streaked with ash, pushing a wheeled dining cart through the gravel. Silver tongs and spoons hanging from the cart chime and clank, and the wheels clatter and wallow. A little polished cherub grins at each corner. The locksmith says, "Is this the house of Francois Janot?" The boy acknowledges neither question nor questioner as he passes. "Do you know what happened to—" The clanging of the cart recedes. Marie-Laure yanks the hem of his coat. "Papa, please." In her coat against the black trees, her face looks paler and more frightened than he has ever seen it. Has he ever asked so much of her? A house has burned, Marie. People are stealing things." "What house?" "The house we have come so far to reach." Over her head he can see the smoldering remains of door frames glow and fade with the passage of the breeze. A hole in the roof frames the darkening sky. 2 more boys emerge from the soot carrying a portrait in a gilded frame twice as tall as they are, the visage of some long-dead great-grandfather glowering at the night. The locksmith holds up his palms to delay them. "Was it airplanes?" One says, "There's plenty more inside." The canvas of the painting ripples. "Do you know the whereabouts of Monsieur Ganot?" The other says, "Ran off yesterday, with the rest. London." "Don't tell him anything," says the first. The boys jog down the driveway with their prize and are swallowed up by the gloom. "London?" whispers Marie-Laure. "The friend of the director is in London?" Sheets of blackened paper scuttle past their feet. Shadows whisper in the trees. A ruptured melon lolls in the drive like an amputated head. The locksmith is seeing too much. All day, mile after mile, he let himself imagine that they would be greeted with food. Little potatoes with hot cores into which he and Marie-Laure would plunge forkfuls of butter, shallots and mushrooms and hard-boiled eggs and bechamel, coffee and cigarettes. He would hand Monsieur Janot the stone, and Janot would pull brass lorgnes out of his breast pocket and fit their lenses over his calm eyes and tell him, real or fake. Then Janot would bury it in the garden or conceal it behind a hidden panel somewhere in his walls. And that would be that. Duty fulfilled. They would be given a private room, take baths, maybe someone would wash their clothes. Maybe Monsieur Janot would tell humorous stories about his friend the director, and in the morning the birds would sing and a fresh newspaper would announce the end of the invasion. Reasonable concessions. He would go back to the Key Pound, spend his evenings installing little sash windows in little wooden houses. Bonjour, bonjour. Everything as before. But nothing is as before. The trees seethe and the house smolders. And standing in the gravel of the driveway, the daylight nearly finished, the locksmith has an unsettling thought. Someone might be coming for us. Someone might know what I carry. He leads Marie-Laure back to the road at a trot. "Papa, my feet!" He swings the rucksack around to his front and wraps her arms around his neck and carries her on his back. They pass the smashed gatehouse and the crashed car and turn not east toward the center of Evero, but west. Figures bicycle past, pinched faces, streaked with suspicion or fear or both. Perhaps it is the locksmith's own eyes that have been streaked. Not so quickly, begs Marie Laure. They rest in weeds 20 paces off the road. There is only plunging night and owls calling from the trees and bats straining insects above in the roadside ditch. A diamond, the locksmith reminds himself, is only a piece of carbon compressed in the bowels of the earth for eons and driven to the surface in a volcanic pipe. Someone facets it. Someone polishes it. It can harbor a curse no more than a leaf can, or a mirror, or a life. There is only chance in this world, chance and physics. Anyway, what he carries is nothing more than a piece of glass, a diversion. Behind him, over Evero, a wall of clouds ignites once, twice. Lightning? On the road ahead, he can make out several acres of uncut hay and the gentle profiles of unlit farm buildings, a house and barn. No movement. Marie, I see a hotel. You said the hotels were full. This one looks friendly. Come, it is not far. Again he carries his daughter. 1 more half-mile. The windows of the house stay unlit as they approach. Its barn sits 100 yards beyond. He tries to listen above the rush of blood in his ears. No dogs, no torches. Probably the farmers, too, have fled. He sets Marie Laure in front of the barn doors and knocks softly, and waits and knocks again. The padlock is a brand new single-latch Burgett. With his tools, he picks it easily. Inside are oats and water buckets and horseflies flying sleepy loops, but no horses. He opens a stall and helps Marie Laure into the corner and pulls off her shoes. Voila, he says. One of the guests has just brought his horses into the lobby, so it may smell for a moment. But now the porters are hurrying him out. See, there he goes. Goodbye, horse. Go sleep in the stables, please. Her expression is far away and lost. A vegetable garden waits behind the house. In the dimness he can make out roses, leeks, lettuces, strawberries. Most are still green. Tender white carrots with black earth clotted in their fibers. Nothing stirs. No farmer materializes in a window with a rifle. The locksmith brings back a shirt full of vegetables and fills a tin bucket at a spigot and eases to shut the barn door and feeds his daughter in the dark. Then he folds his coat, lays her head on it, and wipes her face with his shirt. 2 cigarettes left. Inhale, exhale. Walk the paths of logic. Every outcome has its cause, and every predicament has its solution. Every lock its key. You can go back to Paris, or you can stay here, or you can go on. From outside comes the soft hooting of owls, distant grumbling of thunder, or ordnance, or both. He says, "This hotel is very cheap, ma chérie. The innkeeper behind the desk said our room was 40 francs a night, but only 20 francs if we make our own bed." He listens to her breathe. So I said, "Oh, we can make our own bed." And he said, "Right, I'll get you some nails and wood." Marie Laure still does not smile. "Now we go find Uncle Etienne?" "Yes, Marie." "Who is 76% crazy?" "He was with your grandfather, his brother, when he died. In the war, it got a bit of gas in the head, is how they used to say it. Afterward, he saw things." "What kind of things?" Creaking rumble of thunder closer now. The barn quakes lightly. Things that were not there. Spiders draw their web between rafters, moths flap against the windows, and it starts to rain. Entrance exam. Entrance exams for the National Political Institutes of Education are held in Essen, 18 miles south of Zollverein, inside a sweltering dance hall where a trio of truck-sized radiators is plugged into the back wall. One of the radiators clangs and steams all day, despite various attempts to shut it down. War Ministry flags as big as tanks hang from the rafters. There are 100 recruits, All boys. A school representative in a black uniform arranges them in ranks 4 deep. Medals chime on his chest as he paces. You are, he declares, attempting to enter the most elite schools in the world. The exams will last 8 days. We will take only the purest, only the strongest. A second representative distributes uniforms, white shirts, white shorts, and white socks. The boys shuck their clothes where they stand. Werner counts 26 others in his age group. All but 2 are taller than he is. All but 3 are blonde. None of them wear eyeglasses. The boys spend that entire first morning in their new white outfits, filling out questionnaires on clipboards. There is no noise save the scribbling of pencils, and the pacing of examiners and the clunking of the huge radiator. Where was your grandfather born? What color are your father's eyes? Has your mother ever worked in an office? Of 110 questions about his lineage, Werner can accurately answer only 16. The rest are guesses. Where is your mother from? There are no options for past tense, and he writes Germany. Where is your father from? Germany. What languages does your mother speak? German. He remembers Frau Elena as she looked early this morning, standing in her nightdress beside the hall lamp, fussing over his bag, all the other children asleep. She seemed lost, dazed, as if she could not absorb how quickly things were changing around her. She said she was proud. She said Werner should do his best. You're a smart boy, she said. You'll do well. She kept adjusting and readjusting his collar. When he said, "It's only a week," her eyes filled slowly, as if some internal flood were gradually overwhelming her. In the afternoon, the recruits run. They crawl under obstacles, do push-ups, scale ropes suspended from the ceiling. 100 children passing sleek and interchangeable in their white uniforms like livestock before the eyes of the examiners. Werner comes in 9th in the shuttle runs. He comes in second to last on the rope climb. He will never be good enough. In the evening, the boys spill out of the hall, some met by proud-looking parents with automobiles, others vanishing purposefully in 2s and 3s into the streets. All seem to know where they're going. Werner makes his way alone to a Spartan hostel 6 blocks away, where he rents a bed for 2 marks a night and lies among muttering insurance and listens to the pigeons and bells and shuddering traffic of Essen. It is the first night he has spent outside of Zollverein, and he cannot stop thinking of Jutta, who has not spoken to him since discovering he smashed their radio, who stared at him with so much accusation in her face that he had to look away. Her eyes said, "You are betraying me." But wasn't he protecting her? On the second morning, there are radiological exams. They require little of Werner except to raise his arms or keep from blinking while an inspector shines a penlight into the tunnels of his pupils. He sweats and shifts. His heart pounds unreasonably. An onion-breath technician in a lab coat measures the distance between Werner's temples, the circumference of his head, and the thickness and shape of his lips. Calipers are used to evaluate his feet, the length of his fingers, and the distance between his eyes and his navel. They measure his penis. The angle of his nose is quantified with a wooden protractor. A second technician gauges Werner's eye color against a chromatic scale on which 62 or so shades of blue are displayed. Werner's color is Himmelblau, or sky blue. To assess his hair color, the man snips a lock of hair from Werner's head and compares it to 30 or so other locks clipped to a board, arrayed, darkest to lightest. Schnee, the man mutters and makes a notation. Snow. Werner's hair is lighter than the lightest color on the board. They test his vision, draw his blood, take his fingerprints. By noon he wonders if there's anything left for them to measure. Verbal exams come next. How many... National Politki... I'm sorry, this word. Holy cow. Erzi Hungelstatten are there? 20. I butchered that. I'm so sorry. Who are our greatest Olympians? He doesn't know. What is the birthday of the Führer? April 20th. Who is our greatest writer? What is the Treaty of Versailles? Which is the nation's fastest airplane? Day 3 involves more running, more climbing, more jumping. Everything is timed. The technicians, school representatives, and examiners, each wearing uniforms in subtly different shades, scribble on pads of graph paper with a very narrow gauge, and sheet after sheet of this paper gets closed into leather binders with a gold lightning bolt stamped on the front. The recruits speculate in eager whispers. I hear the schools have sailboats, falconries, rifle ranges. I hear they will take only 7 from each age group. I hear it's only 4. They speak of the schools with yearning and bravado. They want desperately to be selected. Werner tells himself, so do I, so do I. And yet at other times, despite his ambitions, he is visited by instants of vertigo. He sees Jutta holding the smashed pieces of their radio and feels uncertainty squeal into his gut. The recruits scale walls, they run wind sprint after wind sprint. On the 5th day, 3 quit. On the 6th, 4 more give up. Each hour, the dance hall seems to grow progressively warmer, so by the 8th day, the air, walls, and floor are saturated with the hot, teeming odor of boys. For their final test, each of the 14-year-olds is forced to climb a ladder haphazardly nailed to a wall. Once at the top, 25 feet above the floor, their heads in the rafters, they are supposed to step onto a tiny platform, close their eyes, and leap off, to be caught in a flag held by dozens of other recruits. First to go is a stout farm kid from Herne. He scales the ladder quickly enough, but as soon as he's on the platform high above everyone else, his face goes white. His knees wobble dangerously. Someone mutters, "Pussy." The boy beside Werner whispers, "Afraid of heights." An examiner watches dispassionately. The boy on the platform peeks over the edge as if into a swirling abyss and shuts his eyes. He sways back and forth. Interminable seconds pass. The examiner peers at his stopwatch. Werner clutches the hem of the flag. Soon, most everyone in the dance hall has stopped to watch, even recruits in other age groups. The boy sways twice more until it's clear he's about to faint. Even then, no one moves to help him. When he goes over, he goes sideways. The recruits on the ground manage to swing the flag around in time, but his weight tears the edges out of their hands and he hits the floor, arms first, with a sound like a bundle of kindling breaking over a knee. The boy sits up. Both of his forearms are bent at nauseating angles. He blinks at them curiously for a moment, as if scanning his memory for a clue that might explain how he got there. Then he starts to scream. Werner looks away. 4 boys are ordered to carry the injured one out. One by one, the remaining 14-year-olds climb the ladder and tremble and leap. One sobs the whole way. Another sprains an ankle when he hits. The next waits at least 2 full minutes before jumping. The 15th boy looks out across the dance hall as if staring into a bleak, cold sea, and then climbs back down. Werner watches from his place on the flag. When his turn comes, he tells himself he must not waver. On the undersides of his eyelids he sees the interlaced ironwork of Zollverein, the fire-breathing mills, men teeming out of elevator shafts like ants, the mouth of Pit 9 where his father was lost, Jutta in the parlor window sealed behind the rain, watching him follow the corporal to Herr Sadler's house, the taste of whipped cream and powdered sugar and the smooth calves of Herr Sadler's wife. Exceptional, unexpected. We will take only the purest, only the strongest. The only place your brother is going, little girl, is into the mines. Werner scampers up the ladder. The rungs have been roughly sawed, and his palms take splinters the whole way. From the top, the crimson flag with its white wide circle and black cross looks unexpectedly small. A pale ring of faces stares up. It's even hotter up here, torrid, and the smell of perspiration makes him lightheaded. Without hesitating, Werner steps to the edge of the platform and shuts his eyes and jumps. He hits the flag in its exact center, and the boys holding the edge give a collective groan. He rolls to his feet, uninjured. The examiner clicks his stopwatch and scribbles on his clipboard and looks up. Their eyes meet for half a second, maybe less. Then the man goes back to his notations. "Heil Hitler!" yells Werner. The next boy starts up the ladder. Brittany. In the morning, an ancient furniture lorry stops for them. Her father lifts her onto its bed, where a dozen people nestle beneath a waxed canvas tarp. The engine roars and pops. The truck rarely accelerates past walking speed. A woman prays in a Norman accent. Someone shares pâté. Everything smells of rain. No Stukas swoop over them. Machine guns blazing. No one in the truck has even seen a German. For half the morning, Marie-Laure tries to convince herself that the previous days have been some elaborate test concocted by her father, that the truck is moving not away from Paris but toward it, that tonight they'll return home. The model will be on its bench in the corner, the sugar bowl will be in the center of the kitchen table, its little spoon resting on the rim. Out the open windows, the cheese seller on the Rue des Patriarches will lock his door and shutter up those marvelous smells, as he has done nearly every evening that she can remember, and the leaves of the chestnut tree will clatter and murmur, and her father will boil coffee, and draw her a hot bath and say, "You did well, Marie-Laure, I'm proud." The truck bounces from highway to country road to dirt lane. Weeds brush its flanks. Well after midnight, west of Cancale, they've run out of fuel. "Not much farther," her father whispers. Marie-Laure shuffles along half asleep. The road seems hardly wider than a path. The air smells like wet grain and hedge trimmings. In the lulls between their footfalls she can hear a deep, nearly subsonic roar. She tugs her father to a stop. Armies! The ocean. She cocks her head. "It's the ocean, Marie, I promise." He carries her on his back. Now the barking of gulls, the smell of wet stones, of bird shit, of salt, though she never knew salt to have a smell. The sea murmuring in a language that travels through stones, air, and the sky. What did Captain Nemo say? The sea does not belong to tyrants. "We're crossing into Saint-Malo now," says her father, "the part they call the city within the walls." He narrates what he sees, a portcullis, defensive walls called ramparts, granite mansions, a steeple above rooftops. The echoes of his footfalls ricochet off tall houses and rain back onto them, and he labors beneath her weight. And she is old enough to suspect that what he presents as quaint and welcoming might in truth be harrowing and strange. Birds make strangled cries overhead. Her father turns left, right. It feels to Marie-Laure as if they have wound past these 4 days toward the center of a bewildering maze, and now they are tiptoeing past the pickets of some final interior cell, inside which a terrible beast might slumber. "Rue Vaudreuil," her father says between pants. "Here it must be. Or here?" He pivots, retraces their steps, climbs an alley, and then turns around. "Is there no one to ask?" "There's not a single light, Marie. Everyone is asleep or pretending to be." Finally they reach a gate, and he sets her down on a curbstone and pushes an electric buzzer. She can hear it ring deep within a house. Nothing. He presses again. Again nothing. He presses a third time. "This is the house of your uncle?" "It is." "He doesn't know us," she says. "He's sleeping, as we should be." They sit with their backs to the gate, wrought iron and cool, a heavy wooden door just behind it. She leans her head on his shoulder. He pulls off her shoes. The world seems to sway gently back and forth, as though the town is drifting lightly away. As though back on shore, all of France is left to bite its fingernails and flee and stumble and weep and wake onto a numb, gray dawn, unable to believe what is happening. Who do the roads belong to now? And the fields, the trees? Her father takes his final cigarette from his shirt pocket and lights it. From deep inside the house behind them come footfalls. Madame Manec. As soon as her father says his name, the breathing on the other side of the door becomes a gasp, a held breath. The gate screeches, a door behind it gives way. "Jesus' mother," says a voice, "you were so small." "My daughter, madame. Marie-Laure, this is Madame Manec." Marie-Laure attempts a curtsy. The hand that cups her cheek is strong, the hand of a geologist or a gardener. My God, there are none so distant the fate cannot bring them together, but, dear child, your stockings and your heels, you must be famished. They step into a narrow entry. Marie Laure hears the gate clang shut, then the woman latching the door behind them. 2 deadbolts, 1 chain. They are led into a room that smells of herbs and rising dough. A kitchen. Her father unbuttons her coat and helps her sit. "We are very grateful. I understand how late it is," he is saying. And the old woman, Madame Manec, is brisk, efficient. Evidently overcoming her initial amazement, she brushes off their thank yous and scoots Marie Laure's chair toward a tabletop. A match is struck. Water fills a pot. An icebox clinks open and shut. There is the hum of gas and the tick-tick of heating metal. In another moment, a warm towel is on Marie's face, a jar of cool, sweet water in front of her, each sip a blessing. "Oh, the town is absolutely stuffed," Madame Manec is saying in her fairy-tale drawl as she moves about. She seems short. She wears blocky, heavy shoes. Hers is a low voice, full of pebbles, a sailor's voice, or a smoker's perhaps. Some can afford hotels or rentals, but many are in the warehouses, on straw, not enough to eat. I'd take them in, but your uncle, it might upset him. There's no diesel, no kerosene. British ships are long gone. They burned everything they left behind. At first I couldn't believe any of it, but Etienne, he has the wireless going non-stop. Eggs crack, butter pops in a hot pan. Her father is telling an abridged story of their flight. Train stations, fearful crowds, omitting the stop in Evero. But soon all of Marie Laure's attention is absorbed by the smells blooming around her. Egg, spinach, melting cheese. An omelet arrives. She positions her face over its steam. "May I please have a fork?" The old woman laughs, a laugh Marie Laure warms to immediately. In an instant a fork is fitted into her hand. The eggs taste like clouds, like spun gold. Madame Manec says, "I think she likes it," and laughs again. A second omelet soon appears. Now it is her father who eats quickly. "How about peaches, dear?" murmurs Madame Manec, and Marie Laure can hear a can opening, juice slopping into a bowl. Seconds later she's eating wedges of wet sunlight. "Marie," murmurs her father, "your manners." "But we have plenty. You go ahead, child. I make them every year." When Marie Laure has eaten 2 full cans of peaches, Madame Manec cleans Marie Laure's feet with a rag and shakes out her coat and clanks dishes into a sink and says, "Cigarette?" And her father groans with gratitude, and a match flares, and the grown-ups smoke. A door opens, or a window, and Marie Laure can hear the hypnotic voice of the sea. "And Etienne?" says her father. Madame says, "Shuts himself up like a corpse one day, eats like an albatross the next." He still does not for 20 years. Probably the grown-ups are mouthing more to each other. Probably Marie Laure should be more cautious, more curious. About her great-uncle, who sees things that are not there. About the fate of everyone and everything she has ever known, but her stomach is full. Her blood has become a warm, golden flow through her arteries, and out the open window, beyond the walls, the ocean crashes, only a bit of stacked stone left between her and it, the rim of Brittany, the farthest window-sill of France, and maybe the Germans are advancing as inexorably as lava. But Marie Laure is slipping into something like a dream, or perhaps it's the memory of one. She's 6 or 7 years old, newly blind, and her father is sitting in the chair beside her bed, whittling away at some tiny piece of wood, smoking a cigarette. An evening is settling over the 100,000 rooftops and chimneys of Paris, and all the walls around her are dissolving, the ceilings too, the whole city is disintegrating into smoke, and at last sleep falls over her like a shadow. You have been called. Everyone wants to hear Werner's stories. What were the exams like? What did they make you do? Tell us everything. The youngest children tug his sleeves, and the older ones are differential. This snowy-haired dreamer plucked out of the soot. They said they'd accept only 2 from my age group. maybe 3. Far from the far end of the table, he can feel the heat of Juta's attention. With the rest of the money from Herr Seidler, he purchased a People's receiver for 34 marks 80, a 2-valve, low-powered radio, even cheaper than the state-sponsored Volkspumper that he had repaired in the houses of neighbors. Unmodified, its receiver can haul in only the big long-wave nationwide programs from Deutschlandsender. Nothing else. Nothing foreign. The children shout, delighted as he presents it. Jutta shows no interest. Martin Sask asks, was there loads of math? Was there cheeses? Was there cakes? Did they let you shoot rifles? Did you ride in tanks? I bet you rode in tanks. Werner says, I didn't know answers to half their questions. I'll never get in. But he does. 5 days after he returns from Essen, the letter is hand-delivered to Children's House, an eagle and a cross on a crisp envelope. No stamp. Like a dispatch from God. Frau Elena is doing laundry. The little boys are clustered around the new radio, a half-hour program called Kids Club. Jutta and Claudia Forster have taken 3 of the younger girls to a puppet show in the market. Jutta has spoken no more than 6 words to Werner since his return. You have been called, says the letter. Werner is to report to the National Political Institute of Education No. 6 at Schulforta. He stands in the parlor of Children's House, trying to absorb it. Cracked walls, sagging ceiling, twin benches that have borne child after child after child for as long as the mine has made orphans. He has found a way out. Schulforta, tiny dot on the map, near Naumburg in Saxony, 200 miles east. Only in his most intrepid dreams did he allow himself to hope that he might travel so far. He carries the sheet of paper in a daze to the alley, where Frau Elena boils sheets amid billows of steam. She rereads it several times. We can't pay. We don't need to. How far? 5 hours by train. They've already paid the fare. When? 2 weeks. Frau Elena, strands of hair stuck to her cheeks, maroon aprons under her eyes, pink rims around her nostrils, thin crucifix against her damp throat. Is she proud? She rubs her eyes and nods absently. They'll celebrate this. She hands the letter back and stares down the alley at the dense ranks of clotheslines and coal bins. Who, Frau? Everyone. The neighbors. She laughs a sudden and startling laugh. People like that Vice Minister. The man who took your book. Not Jutta. No, not Jutta. He rehearses in his head the argument he will present to his sister. Pflicht. It means duty, obligation. Every German fulfilling his function. Put on your boots and go to work. Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer. We all have parts to play, little sister. But before the girls arrive, news of his acceptance has reverberated through the block. Neighbors come over one after another and exclaim and wag their chins. Coal wives bring pig knuckles and cheese. They pass around Werner's acceptance letter. The ones who can read it aloud to the ones who cannot. And Jutta comes home to a crowded, exhilarated room. The twins, Hannah and Suzanne Gerlitz, sprint laps around the sofa, looped up in the excitement, and the 6-year-old Rolf Hauptfer sings, Rise, rise, all glory to the fatherland, and several of the other children join in. And Werner doesn't see Frau Elena speak to Jutta in the corner of the parlor, doesn't see Jutta run upstairs. At the dinner bell, she does not come down. Frau Elena asks Hannah Gerlitz to lead the prayer and tells Werner she'll talk to Jutta, that he ought to stay downstairs. All these people are here for him. Every few breaths the words flare in his mind like sparks. You have been called. Each minute that passes is one fewer in this house, in this life. After the meal, little Siegfried Fischer, no older than 5, walks around the table and tugs Werner's sleeve and hands him a photograph he has torn from a newspaper. In the picture, 6 fighter bombers float above a mountain range of clouds. Spangles of sun are frozen mid-glide across the airplane's fuselages. The scarves of the pilots stretch backward. Siegfried says, You'll show them, won't you? His face is fierce with belief. It seems to draw a circle around all the hours Werner has spent at Children's House, hoping for something more. I will, Werner says. The eyes of all the children are on him. Absolutely, I will. Marie-Laure wakes to church bells. 2, 3, 4, 5. Faint smell of mildew. Ancient down pillows with all the loft worn out. Silk wallpaper behind the lumpy bed where she sits. When she stretches out both arms, she can almost touch walls on either side. The reverberations of the bells cease. She has slept most of the day. What is the muffled roar she hears? Crowds? Or is it still the sea? She sets her feet on the floor. The wounds on the backs of her heels pulse. Where is her cane? She shuffles so she does not bash her shins on something. Behind curtains, a window rises out of her reach. Opposite the window, she finds a dresser whose drawers open only part way before striking the bed. The weather in this place, you can feel it between your fingers. She gropes through a doorway into, what, a hall? Out here, the roar is fainter, barely a murmur. Hello? Quiet. Then a bustling far below. The heavy shoes of Madame Manec climbing flights of narrow, curving steps, her smoker's lungs coming closer. 3rd floor, 4th. How tall is this house? Now Madame's voice is calling, Mademoiselle! And she is taken by the hand, led back into the room in which she woke and seated on the edge of the bed. Do you need to use... You must. Then a bath. You had an excellent sleep. Your father is in town trying the telegraph office, though I assured him that he'll be about as profitable as trying to pick feathers out of molasses. Are you hungry? Madame Manec plumps pillows and flaps the quilt. Marie-Laure tries to concentrate on something small, something concrete. The model back in Paris, a single seashell in Dr. Jaffard's laboratory. Does this whole house belong to my great-uncle Etienne? Every room. How does he pay for it? Madame Manec laughs. You get right to the point, don't you? Your great-uncle inherited the house from his father, who was your great-grandfather. He was a very successful man with plenty of money. You knew him? I have worked here since Master Etienne was a little boy. My grandfather, too? You knew him? I did. Will I meet Uncle Etienne now? Madame Manec hesitates. Probably not. But he is here. Yes, child, he is always here. Always? Madame Manec's big, thick hands enfold hers. Let's see about the bath. Your father will explain when he returns. But Papa doesn't explain anything. He says only that Uncle was in the war with my grandfather. That's right. But your great-uncle, when he came home, Madame hunts for the proper phrasing, he was not the same as when he left. You mean he was more scared of things? I mean lost, a mouse in a trap. He saw dead people passing through the walls, terrible things in the corners of the streets. Now, your great-uncle does not go outdoors. Not ever? Not for years, but Etienne is a wonder. You'll see. He knows everything. Marie-Laure listens to the house timbers creak and the gulls cry and the gentle roar breaking against the window. Are we high in the air, madame? We are on the 6th floor. It's a good bed, isn't it? I thought you and your papa would be able to rest well here. Does the window open? It does, dear, but it probably is best to leave it shuttered while... Marie-Laure is already standing atop the bed, running her palms along the wall. Can one see the sea from it? We're supposed to keep shutters and windows closed, but maybe just for a moment. Madame Manec turns a handle and pulls in the 2 hinged panes out of the window and nudges open the shutter. Wind, immediate, bright, sweet, briny, and luminous. The roar rises and falls. Are there snails out there, madame? Snails in the ocean? Again that laugh, as many as raindrops. Are you interested in snails? Yes, I have found 3 snails, and 3 tree snails and garden snails. But I have never found marine snails. Well, says Madame Manec, you've turned up in the right place. Madame draws a warm bath in the third-floor tub. From the tub, Marie-Laure listens to her shut the door, and the cramped bathroom groan beneath the weight of the water, and the walls creak as if she were in a cabin inside Captain Nemo's Nautilus. The pain in her heels fades. She lowers her head below the level of the water. To never go outdoors. To hide for decades inside this strange, narrow house. For dinner, she is buttoned into a starchy dress from some bygone decade. They sit at the square kitchen table, her father and Madame Manec at opposite sides, knees pressed to knees, windows jammed shut, shutters drawn. A wireless set mumbles the names of ministers in a harried staccato voice. De Gaulle in London, Pétain replacing Renaud. They eat fish stewed with green tomatoes. Her father reports that no letters have been delivered or collected in 3 days. Telegraph lines are not functioning. The newest newspaper is 6 days old. On the radio, the announcer reads public service classifieds. Monsieur Chamois, refugeed in Orange, seeks his 3 children, left with luggage at Ivry-sur-Seine. Francis in Genève seeks any information about Marie-Jeanne, last seen in Gentilly. Mother sends prayers to Luc and Albert, wherever they are. El Rabier seeks news of his wife, last seen Gare d'Orsay. Aide Cotret wants his mother to know he is safe in Laval. Madame Messieurs seeks whereabouts of 6 daughters sent by train to Redon. Everybody has misplaced someone, murmurs Madame Manec. And Marie-Laure's father switches off the wireless, and the tubes click as they cool. Upstairs, faintly, the same voice keeps reading names. Or is it her imagination? She hears Madame Manec stand and collect the bowls, and her father exhale cigarette smoke, as though it is very heavy in his lungs and he is glad to be rid of it. That night she and her father wind up the twisting staircase and go to bed side by side on the same lumpy bed in the same 6th-floor bedroom with the fraying silk wallpaper. Her father fusses with his rucksack, with the door latch, with his matches. Soon enough there is the familiar smell of his cigarettes. Gasolines blues. She hears wood pop and groan as the 2 halves of the window pull open. The welcome hiss of wind washes in, or maybe it's the sea in the wind, her ears unable to unbraid the 2. With it comes the scent of salt and hay and fish markets and distant marshes and absolutely nothing that smells to her of war. Can we visit the ocean tomorrow, Papa? Probably not tomorrow. Where is Uncle Etienne? I expect he's in his room on the 5th floor, seeing things that are not there. We are lucky to have him, Marie. Lucky to have Madame Manec, too. She is a genius with food, isn't she, Papa? She is maybe just a little bit better at cooking than you are. Just a very little bit better. Marie-Laure is glad to hear a smile enter his voice, but beneath it she can sense his thoughts fluttering like trapped birds. What does it mean, Papa? They'll occupy us? It means they'll park their trucks in the squares. Will they make us speak their language? They might make us advance our clocks by 1 hour. The house creaks, gulls cry. He lights another cigarette. Is it like occupation, Papa? Like the sort of a job a person does? It's like military control, Marie. That's enough questions for now. Quiet. 20 heartbeats. 30. How can one country make another change its clocks? What if everybody refuses? Then a lot of people will be early. Or late. Remember our apartment, Papa, with my books and our model and all those pine cones on the windowsill? Of course. I lined up the pine cones, largest to smallest. They're still there. Do you think so? I know so. You do not know so. I do not know so. I believe so. Are German soldiers climbing into our beds right now, Papa? No. Marie-Laure tries to lie very still. She can almost hear the machinery of her father's mind churning inside his skull. It will be okay, she whispers. Her hand finds his forearm. We will stay here a while, and then we will go back to our apartment, and the pine cones will be right where we left them, and 20,000 leagues under the sea will be on the floor of the key pound where we left it, and no one will be in our beds. The distant anthem of the sea, the clopping of someone's boot heels on cobbles far below. She wants very badly for her father to say, "Yes, that's it, absolutely, ma chérie." But he says nothing. Don't tell lies. He cannot concentrate on schoolwork or simple conversations or Frau Elena's chores. Every time he shuts his eyes, some vision of the school at Schopforta overmasters him. Vermilion flags, muscular horses, gleaming laboratories, the best boys in Germany. At certain moments he sees himself as an emblem of possibility to which all eyes have turned, though at other moments flickering in front of him he sees the big kid from the entrance exams, his face gone bloodless atop the platform high above the dance hall. How he fell. How no one moved to help him. Why can't Jutta just be happy for him? Why, even at the moment of his escape, must some inexplicable warning murmur in a distant region of his mind? Martin Schotsky says, "Tell us again about the hand grenades." Siegfried says, "And the falconries." 3 times he readies his argument, and 3 times Jutta turns on a heel and strides away. Hour after hour she helps Frau Elena with the smaller children, or walks to the market, or finds some other excuse to be helpful, to be busy, to be out. She won't listen, Werner tells Frau Elena. Keep trying. Before he knows it, there's only 1 day before his departure. He wakes before dawn and finds Jutta asleep in her cot in the girls' dormitory. Her arms are wrapped around her head, and her wool blanket is twisted around her midsection, and her pillow is jammed into the crack between the mattress and the wall. Even in sleep, a tableau of friction. Above her bed are papered the fantastical pencil drawings of Frau Elena's village, of Paris with 1,000 white towers beneath whirling flocks of birds. He says her name. She twines herself tighter into her blanket. Will you walk with me? To his surprise, she sits up. They step outside before anyone else is awake. He leads her without speaking. They climb one fence and then another. Jutta's untied shoelaces trail behind her. Thistles bite their knees. The rising sun makes a pinhole on the horizon. They stop at the edge of an irrigation canal. In winters past, Werner used to tow her in their wagon to this very spot, and they would watch skaters race along the frozen canal, farmers with blades fixed to their feet and frost caked in their beards. 5 or 6 rushing by all at once, tightly packed in the midst of an 8 or 9-mile race between towns. The look in the skaters' eyes was of horses who have run a long way, and it was always exciting for Werner to see them, to feel the air disturbed by their speed, to hear their skates clapping along, then fading, a sensation as if his soul might tear free of his body and go sparking off with them. But as soon as they'd continued around the bend and left behind only white etchings of their skates in the ice, the thrill would fade, and he'd tow Jutta back to the children's house, feeling lonely and forsaken and more trapped in his life than before. He says no skaters came last winter. His sister gazes into the ditch. Her eyes are mauve. Her hair is snarled and untamable, or perhaps even whiter than his. Schnee. She says, none'll come this year either. The mine complex is a smoldering black mountain range behind her. Even now Werner can hear a mechanical drumbeat thudding in the distance. First shift going down in the elevators as the owl shift comes up. All those boys with tired eyes and soot-stained faces rising in the elevators to meet the sun, and for a moment he apprehends a huge and terrible presence looming just beyond the morning. I know you're angry. You'll become just like Hans and Herbert. I won't. You'll spend enough time with boys like that, and you will. So you want me to stay? Go down in the mines? They watch a bicyclist far down the path. Jutta clamps her hands in her armpits. You know what I used to listen to on our radio before you ruined it? Hush, Yuta, please. Broadcasts from Paris. They'd say the opposite of everything Deutschlandsender says. They'd say we're devils, that we're committing atrocities. Do you know what atrocities means? Please, Yuta. Is it right, Yuta says, to do something only because everyone else is doing it? Doubts, slipping in like eels. Werner shoves them back. Yuta is barely 12 years old, still a child. I'll write you letters every week, twice a week if I can. You don't have to show them to Frau Elena if you don't want to. Yuta shuts her eyes. It's not forever. It's not for forever, Yuta. 2 years, maybe. Half the boys who get admitted won't manage to graduate, but maybe I'll learn something. Maybe they'll teach me to be a proper engineer. Maybe I can learn to fly an airplane, like little Siegfried says. Don't shake your head. We've always wanted to see the inside of an airplane, haven't we? I'll fly us west, you and me, and Frau Elena too if she wants. Or we could take a train. We'll ride through forests and villages, all of those places Frau Elena talked about when we were small. Maybe we could ride all the way to Paris. The burgeoning light, the tender hissing of the grass. Yuta opens her eyes but doesn't look at him. Don't tell lies. Lie to yourself, Werner, but don't lie to me. 10 hours later, he's on a train. And that will draw us to the conclusion for this evening, everybody. Oh man, I can tell we're starting to get into the heart of the good stuff now. It's going to get real intense in the next few chapters, I'm sure. So, how is everyone doing so far? Do you like the story so far? And I apologize, I stumbled so bad over, I don't even know what word it was now, but oh man, I butchered it. I'm so sorry. I tried. I really did. Ah. Oh, goodness. Oh, yes. Put the cover back on my book. All right. Oh, you could, Rhonda, honey, you are so incredibly generous. Thank you so much. In fact, can I find it? Can I find that word that I just absolutely... Probably not, because it was a really long German word, and it was just, oh man, oh my gosh. I looked at it and said, sure. yeah, I almost, that's, to be honest, that was almost me. I kept going over it, and I'm like, how important is this word? It's going to be a long week. Well, here's the thing. I was going to keep on with doing this just once a week, but I feel like it's going to take us too long to get through the story. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start doing Tuesdays and Fridays. I'll probably do Tuesday evenings and Friday evening readings. Because I do have other books that I want to get to at some point, and I don't want to take a terribly long time getting to them. But I'm probably going to, yes. But I'm probably going to make an announcement video about that, just so people don't get too terribly far behind if they want to keep listening. But yeah, I think if that goes over, if that becomes a favorable thing, I will probably do twice a week readings, just because this is kind of a thick book, and this is where we're at right now after 3 readings. So I think I think what I'll do is I'll start Tuesdays and Fridays will be reading days, and then we'll get through this book so we can move on to other books that I want to get to. So, thank you all so very much for joining me again for story time. I very much appreciate you guys being here and listening to me ramble. I hope you all have a wonderful evening and have a great weekend. Please stay safe out there, and I will see you all on Tuesday. Same time, 8 to 9:30 on Tuesday evenings. So I'll see you guys later.